What happened next made my entire family's jaws drop and turned their years of mockery into the most humiliating silence of their lives. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick ivory paper with gold embossing that screamed old money. The texture felt expensive between my fingers as I read the elegant script. Victoria Pemberton and James Richardson cordially invite you to witness their union at the Cathedral of the Holy Cross, Boston, Massachusetts. I traced my finger over my cousin's name, remembering when we used to build blanket forts in grandmother's library and dream about our futures. That was before she decided I was the family disappointment. I hadn't been home to Boston in 3 years. Not since the last family gathering where Uncle Charles had loudly announced that my little legal hobby was just a phase, and Aunt Margaret had asked, in front of everyone, when I was going to get a real job that actually matters. Victoria had laughed the hardest, tossing her perfectly styled honey blonde hair and saying, "Oh, Riley's still playing lawyer, how quaint." The memory still stung. I'd been 22 then, fresh out of Harvard Law School with honors, proud of my commission as a JAG officer in the Army. I'd thought they'd be proud too. Instead, I'd watched their faces fall as I explained my decision to serve my country while building a legal career focused on justice rather than corporate profits. The military? Uncle Charles had scoffed, his brandy glass pausing halfway to his lips. What a waste of a Harvard education. And criminal law? Riley, darling, that's not what Pembertons do. We handle mergers, acquisitions, real estate empires. We build wealth, not chase petty criminals around courtrooms. Aunt Margaret had nodded vigorously, her pearls catching the light from the crystal chandelier. Exactly. Look at Victoria. She's already making partner track at Pemberton Crawley and Associates, following in the family tradition, making something of herself. The return address stared back at me now, the Pemberton Estate, 247 Beacon Hill, Boston, Massachusetts, 02108. Home, or what used to be home, the sprawling Victorian mansion, where portraits of distinguished ancestors lined the mahogany-paneled walls. Senators, federal judges, Supreme Court justices, business magnates who'd shaped New England's financial landscape for over a century. Everyone who'd made something of themselves. Everyone except me, according to them. I set the invitation beside my morning coffee and stared out the window of my modest 2-bedroom apartment in Alexandria, Virginia. The view wasn't much, a parking lot in a strip mall, but it was mine. Earned with my own money, my own work, my own choices. At 25, I wore my dress blues to work every day, serving as a judge advocate general officer at the Pentagon while building my civilian legal career on nights and weekends. My family saw neither the uniform nor the late-night law books. They only saw someone who'd wasted her Harvard law degree on what they called small-town nonsense. But it wasn't small-town nonsense. In the past 3 years, I'd prosecuted 17 military cases, including 3 high-profile court-martials that had made national news. I'd helped send corrupt officers to prison, protected victims of military sexual assault, and ensured that justice was served regardless of rank or connections. Every evening after my military duties, I worked pro bono cases for the Virginia Public Defender's Office, representing clients who couldn't afford the kind of white-shoe lawyers my family employed. The wedding was in 6 weeks. 6 weeks to decide whether I was ready to face the whispers, the pitying looks, the casual dismissal of everything I'd worked for. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria herself. Riley, so excited you got the invite. Hope you can make it. Would love to catch up. Wedding party is going to be amazing. All the right people will be there. XOXO. The exclamation points felt like tiny daggers. I could practically hear her voice, sweet on the surface, but with that underlying tone that had always made me feel small. The same tone she'd used when she'd announced her engagement to James Richardson III, heir to the Richardson shipping fortune. The same tone she'd used when she'd gotten her position at the family law firm straight out of college. No bar exam stress, no job interviews, just a name and connections opening every door. While I'd spent 3 years grinding through night school for my master's in criminal justice, military service, weekend court appearances, and proving myself case by case in front of judges who didn't care about my last name, I picked up the RSVP card, my pen hovering over the response line. Part of me wanted to check will not attend and continue living my quiet life, building my practice, serving my country. The other part, the part that remembered being told I'd never amount to anything significant, whispered that maybe it was time to stop hiding. The morning light caught my dress blue uniform hanging in the closet, the JAG insignia gleaming gold against the dark fabric. The ribbons on my chest told their own story. National Defense Service Medal, Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, Army Commendation Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters. Recognition that meant nothing to people who measured success in stock portfolios and country club memberships. On my desk, a stack of case files waited: criminal prosecutions, military justice matters, appeals that could change lives. The kind of work that kept dangerous people off the streets and protected those who couldn't protect themselves. Work that mattered, even if my family couldn't see past their own narrow definition of success. My laptop displayed an email I'd been staring at for 20 minutes. The subject line read, RE, District Attorney Position, Final Interview Scheduled. I'd been selected as one of 3 finalists for the District Attorney position in Richmond County, Virginia. At 25, I'd be the youngest DA in the state's history. The interview was scheduled for next Monday. I thought about my mentor, Colonel Sarah Martinez's words from last month. Riley, you're ready for the next step. The district attorney position won't stay open long, and you're exactly what this county needs. Someone who understands both military and civilian justice, someone who can't be bought or intimidated. The application process had been grueling. Months of interviews, background checks, presentations to county commissioners, public forums where I'd outlined my vision for criminal justice reform. I'd beaten out candidates with decades more experience, impressed panels with my prosecution record, and my understanding of systemic issues in the justice system. But my family didn't know any of this. To them, I was still playing lawyer in my little military outfit, chasing dreams that didn't matter in their world of inherited wealth and predetermined success. The wedding invitation felt heavier in my hands as I reread the details. Reception at the Four Seasons Hotel, Boston. Black tie optional. Adults only. All the markers of a Pemberton family event. Expensive, exclusive, and designed to remind everyone of their place in the social hierarchy. I remembered Victoria's last wedding. Yes, this was her second attempt at matrimony. The first had been to a congressman's son, who turned out to have a gambling addiction and a tendency to disappear to Atlantic City with campaign funds. That divorce had been quietly handled by the family firm, sealed records and non-disclosure agreements, ensuring the Pemberton name remained untainted. This time, she'd chosen more carefully. James Richardson III was Harvard-educated, old money, with a trust fund that would keep him comfortable for several lifetimes. Safe, predictable, everything a Pemberton bride should want, according to family tradition. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. The caller ID showed my mother's name, Catherine Pemberton Wells. I let it go to voicemail, knowing exactly what the message would contain. 2 minutes later, her voice filled my apartment through the speakerphone. Riley, darling, I assume you received Victoria's invitation. I do hope you'll make an effort to attend and perhaps, well, dress appropriately for once. And please, do try to socialize. The Hendersons will be there, and their son Marcus just made partner at his firm. He's single, you know, and quite successful. Much more suitable than those military types you've been associating with. Call me back, dear. The message cut off, leaving silence that felt louder than her words. Marcus Henderson. I remembered him from childhood. A pale, soft-handed boy who'd cried when he'd gotten dirt on his clothes, and whose greatest ambition had been to inherit his father's practice without having to work for it. The fact that my mother considered him a suitable match told me everything I needed to know about her opinion of my life choices. I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the American flag flying over the courthouse across the street. In a few hours, I'd be back in that courthouse, prosecuting a case against a defense contractor who'd been selling defective body armor to military units overseas. 3 soldiers had died because of his greed, and I was going to make sure he spent the next 20 years in federal prison. That was the kind of work that got me up every morning. Not mergers and acquisitions, not helping rich people get richer, but ensuring that justice was served and that people who thought they were above the law learned otherwise. My laptop chimed with another email. This one was from D.A. Harold Peterson, the outgoing district attorney who'd announced his retirement after 30 years in office. The subject line made my heart race. Confidential, early decision. I clicked it open with trembling fingers. Riley, I wanted to give you advance notice before the official announcement tomorrow. The selection committee was unanimous. You've been chosen as the next district attorney for Richmond County. Congratulations. The formal announcement will be made at tomorrow's press conference at 2 p.m. I know you'll serve this county with the same integrity and dedication you've shown throughout this process. Best regards, Harold Peterson, District Attorney, Richmond County. I stared at the screen, reading the words 3 times before they sank in. District Attorney. At 25, the youngest in Virginia history. My hands shook as I picked up the wedding invitation again. Victoria's wedding was in 6 weeks. The DA announcement would be public knowledge by then, covered in newspapers across the state. My family would know exactly who I'd become while they were busy dismissing my little legal hobby. For the first time in 3 years, I smiled thinking about a family gathering. I picked up the RSVP card and signed it with steady hands. Captain Riley Pemberton, attending. What they didn't know yet was that by the time I walked into that wedding, I wouldn't just be the family's disappointment in a military uniform. I wouldn't be the cousin who'd wasted her Harvard education on idealistic nonsense. I'd be the person with the power to prosecute their kind when they thought their money and connections made them untouchable. I'd be the district attorney of Richmond County, Virginia. And I couldn't wait to see their faces when they found out. The press conference announcing my appointment as district attorney had been scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, but by Thursday morning I was already drowning in congratulatory calls and interview requests. The Richmond Times-Dispatch had run a front-page story. Harvard law graduate, 25, youngest DA in Virginia history. The Washington Post picked it up by noon. By evening, it had reached the Boston Globe. I knew my family had seen it when my phone started buzzing with calls I didn't answer. Aunt Margaret. Uncle Charles, 3 missed calls from my mother, and finally, Victoria herself. I was sitting in my Pentagon office, reviewing case files for an upcoming court-martial, when her name flashed on my screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Riley, oh my God! Her voice was sickeningly sweet, but I could hear the underlying tension. I just saw the news. District Attorney. How absolutely surprising. There it was. The same tone she'd used when we were 12 and I'd beaten her in the school spelling bee. Surprise, mixed with something that wasn't quite resentment but wasn't congratulations either. Hello, Victoria, I said, not bothering to match her enthusiasm. I mean, I had no idea you were that you were doing anything so significant. She stumbled over the words, clearly struggling to reconcile the cousin she'd dismissed with the headlines she'd just read. Mother called me in tears. She said she had no idea you were even in the running for such a position. Of course she didn't. None of them had bothered to ask what I was actually doing with my life. They'd made their assumptions and stuck to them. It's been a long process, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Months of interviews and background checks. Well, it's just so unexpected. I mean, the last time we talked, you were doing that military thing and working nights at some little law office. And now this is quite the leap. That military thing, as if serving my country was a hobby I'd eventually outgrow. Things change, Victoria. They certainly do, she laughed, but it sounded forced. Well, this certainly makes the wedding more interesting. I mean, having a district attorney in the family. Daddy is beside himself. You know how he feels about criminal law. I knew exactly how Uncle Charles felt about criminal law. He'd made his opinion clear at every family gathering. It was beneath the Pemberton family dignity. Criminal lawyers were ambulance chasers, prosecutors were failed corporate lawyers, and anyone who chose to work in the criminal justice system was either too idealistic or too incompetent for real legal work. I'm sure he'll adjust, I said dryly. Oh, I'm sure he will. And Riley, about the wedding? I do hope this new position won't make things awkward. I mean, James's family is very traditional, very conservative. They're not used to mixing with people in law enforcement. Law enforcement. She said it like I was a beat cop who might embarrass them at the country club. I'll try to contain myself, Victoria. Oh, you know what I mean. It's just that some of James's groomsmen are in finance, and you know how sensitive those types can be about prosecutors. All that regulation talk makes them nervous. She laughed again, still forced. But I'm sure it will be fine. After all, family is family, right? Family is family. The same family that had spent 3 years treating me like a charity case. After I hung up, I sat in my office staring at the wall of commendations and certificates. My Harvard Law degree hung next to my JAG commission. Below that, a photo of me shaking hands with the Attorney General of Virginia after a successful prosecution of a human trafficking ring. Awards from victim advocacy groups. Letters of appreciation from military families whose cases I'd handled. None of it had mattered to them, not until it was splashed across newspaper headlines. The intercom buzzed. Captain Pemberton? Colonel Martinez would like to see you. I walked down the hall to my mentor's office, my dress blues crisp despite the humid Washington heat. Colonel Sarah Martinez had been my commanding officer for 2 years and had become something of a mother figure. She was the one who'd encouraged me to apply for the DA position, who'd written recommendation letters, who'd believed in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself. Come in, Riley, close the door. I sat across from her desk, noting the serious expression on her face. I've been getting calls, she said without preamble. Calls about you. My stomach dropped. What kind of calls? The kind that make me suspicious. 3 different people, all claiming to be doing, quote, routine background verification for various purposes. All asking very specific questions about your character, your judgment, your stability. I felt cold despite the warm office. Who were they? Quote. That's the interesting part. When I called the numbers back, 2 were disconnected. The 3rd went to a law firm in Boston, Pemberton, Crowley & Associates. My family's firm, Uncle Charles's firm, Victoria's firm. They're investigating me? Colonel Martinez leaned forward, her expression grim. Riley, I've been in the military for 25 years. I know the difference between legitimate background checks and fishing expeditions. These weren't routine inquiries. Someone is looking for dirt. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. My family wasn't just surprised by my success, they were threatened by it. A criminal prosecutor in the family was bad enough, but a district attorney? Someone with the power to investigate financial crimes, corruption, the kind of white-collar offenses that people like Uncle Charles spent their careers helping clients avoid? What did you tell them? Nothing. But Riley, you need to be careful. If your own family is conducting opposition research against you, there's something bigger going on here. I thought about Uncle Charles's clients. Old Boston money. The kind of people who'd built their fortunes through methods that wouldn't withstand modern scrutiny. Offshore accounts, tax shelters, the gray areas between legal and illegal that high-priced lawyers helped their clients navigate. Colonel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She nodded. In your opinion, based on everything you know about my work, my character, my judgment, am I qualified for this position? Riley, you're not just qualified. You're exceptional. In 2 years, you've handled more complex cases than most JAG officers see in their entire careers. You've never lost a prosecution. You've shown integrity that's rare at any level of government. That DA position isn't a favor or a lucky break. You earned it. Her words should have been reassuring, but they only highlighted how little my family actually knew about who I'd become. That evening, I called my mother back. She answered on the first ring. Riley, darling, I've been trying to reach you all day. I've been busy, Mom. New job and all. Yes, well, that's what I wanted to talk about. This district attorney business. It's quite unexpected. Is it? I've been working in criminal law for 3 years. Well, yes, but we thought that was just... We didn't realize you were pursuing it so seriously. I mean, criminal law, darling. It's so... public. So controversial. There it was. Not congratulations, not pride, concern about how my career might reflect on them. It's also necessary, Mom. Of course it is, dear. I'm not saying it isn't important work. It's just that the Pemberton name has always been associated with more refined areas of law. Corporate work, estate planning, that sort of thing. Things that don't end up in the newspapers quite so often. You mean things that don't embarrass you at the country club? Riley, that's not fair. We're proud of you, of course we are. It's just, well, your uncle is concerned about potential conflicts of interest. What kind of conflicts? Well, you know Uncle Charles has many prominent clients. Business leaders, politicians, that sort of thing. And if you're going to be prosecuting, well, it could create uncomfortable situations. Uncomfortable situations, like me doing my job. Mom, are you asking me to recuse myself from cases involving Uncle Charles's clients? Of course not. I'm just saying that family harmony is important, and we want to make sure that your new position doesn't create tensions. Tensions. Not pride, not support. Tensions. I'll do my job according to the law and my oath of office. If that creates tensions, they'll have to be managed. There was a long pause. Riley, sometimes I wonder if you understand what this family has given you. Your education, your opportunities, your name. The Pemberton name opens doors. And apparently makes some people want to investigate me before I can use my position effectively. Another pause, longer this time. I don't know what you mean by that. Mom, Colonel Martinez told me that Uncle Charles's firm has been making inquiries about me. Background checks. Character investigations. Why would my own family be investigating me? I'm sure that's just routine legal due diligence. Charles is just being thorough. Thorough about what? Riley, you have to understand that your position affects all of us. The family has a reputation to maintain, business relationships to preserve. If there were any irregularities in your background, it would be better to know about them in advance. Irregularities. In my background. The background they'd never bothered to learn about because they'd been too busy dismissing my choices. What irregularities, Mom? My perfect academic record? My spotless military service? My prosecution record that speaks for itself? Don't be dramatic, dear. I'm just saying that public positions invite scrutiny, and the family wants to be prepared. The family wants to be prepared, not to support me, but to manage the damage my success might cause to their reputation. I have to go, Mom. I have cases to review. Riley, don't be like this. We're family. Family looks out for each other. You're right, Mom. Family should look out for each other. Maybe you could start by congratulating me instead of investigating me. I hung up before she could respond. That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and my laptop, researching my own family's business connections. What I found made me understand why they were nervous. Uncle Charles's firm represented half the development companies in Boston, companies with city contracts, companies that had been investigated for bid rigging and bribery, though never successfully prosecuted. His client list read like a who's who of New England's most ethically questionable business leaders. The law firm's website showed an impressive roster of clients. Beacon Development Group, investigated twice for construction bid manipulation. Harbor Trust Financial, which had paid a 7-figure settlement to the SEC for securities violations. New England Maritime Holdings, currently under federal review for customs reporting discrepancies. I clicked deeper into public records, following the breadcrumbs that any competent prosecutor would notice. Shell companies registered in Delaware. Board positions that rotated among the same small group of wealthy families. Charitable foundations that seemed to do more entertaining than charity work. James Richardson III, Victoria's fiancé, worked for his family's shipping company. Richardson Maritime had been fined multiple times by the EPA for environmental violations, a company that was currently under federal investigation for customs violations. I found news articles dating back 5 years, describing allegations of underreporting cargo values to avoid tariffs. The pieces formed a picture that made my blood run cold. My family wasn't just worried about embarrassment, they were worried about exposure. As a district attorney, I'd have access to federal databases, law enforcement networks, investigative resources that could uncover the kind of information that high-priced lawyers worked very hard to keep buried. I'd be able to see patterns that individual prosecutors might miss, to connect cases across jurisdictions, to build RICO prosecutions that could bring down entire networks of corruption. I opened Victoria's wedding invitation again and looked at the guest list that had been included. Names I recognized from newspaper business pages and political coverage. State Senator Michael Thornton, whose campaign finances had raised eyebrows during his last election. Judge Patricia Weatherby, whose unusually lenient sentences in white-collar cases had sparked editorial criticism. Police Chief Robert Manning, whose department's evidence handling procedures had allowed several high-profile defendants to escape conviction on technicalities. People with enough money and influence to make problems disappear. People who wouldn't appreciate having a prosecutor in their social circle who couldn't be bought, influenced, or intimidated. For the first time, I began to understand that my family's dismissal hadn't been casual cruelty. It had been strategic. Keep me small, keep me irrelevant, keep me from becoming the kind of person who could threaten their carefully constructed world. But they'd miscalculated. Their dismissal had driven me to prove myself, to excel, to become exactly the kind of person they'd hoped I'd never become. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Detective Maria Santos, Richmond PD. We'd worked several cases together and she owed me a favor. Maria? It's Riley Pemberton. I need to ask you about something, and I need you to keep it between us. Sure, counselor. What's up? If someone wanted to run an unofficial background check on a prosecutor, what would that look like? Depends on who's asking and what they're looking for. Why? Because I think my own family is investigating me, and I want to know what they might find. There was a pause. Riley, that's messed up. Even for family drama, that's messed up. Tell me about it. Can you do some discreet checking? See if anyone's been asking questions about me in unofficial channels? I can make some calls. But Riley? If your family is running opposition research on you, there's a reason. Either they think you're vulnerable, or they think you're dangerous. After we hung up, I sat in the dark thinking about Detective Santos's words. Vulnerable or dangerous? My family had spent 3 years treating me like I was vulnerable, the disappointing relative who needed their patience and understanding while I played at being a lawyer in my little military costume. Now they were discovering I might be dangerous to their business, their reputation, their carefully protected world of moral flexibility and legal gray areas. The wedding was still 5 weeks away. 5 weeks for them to dig, to strategize, to figure out how to handle the new reality of having a prosecutor in the family. 5 weeks for them to discover that their investigation would turn up nothing but excellence, integrity, and a track record that would make any attack on my character backfire spectacularly. But they weren't the only ones who could investigate, and unlike them, I had subpoena power. I opened my laptop again and began making notes. Uncle Charles's clients, James Richardson's business dealings, the network of relationships that connected Boston's elite to questionable practices and protected them from consequences. If they wanted to treat me like a threat, maybe it was time to give them a reason. My phone buzzed with a text message from Detective Santos. Made some calls. 3 different PIs have been asking around about you in the past week, all hired by the same Boston law firm. Someone spending serious money to dig into your background. I stared at the message, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. 3 private investigators. Serious money. My own family was treating me like an enemy to be destroyed, rather than a success to be celebrated. I typed back, "What did they find?" Her response came quickly. "Nothing. You're cleaner than Sunday morning." But Riley? The fact that they're looking this hard means they're scared of something. What aren't you telling me about your family? What wasn't I telling her? That my family had built their fortune on the kind of legal gray areas that prosecutors like me specialized in turning into criminal cases. That Uncle Charles's firm had made millions, helping wealthy clients avoid taxes, hide assets, and navigate regulations in ways that would make federal prosecutors salivate. That I was no longer just the family disappointment. I was their worst nightmare. I closed my laptop and walked to my window, looking out at the lights of Washington, D.C. Somewhere in those buildings were the federal prosecutors who'd love to know what I was learning about Boston's financial elite. Somewhere were the FBI agents who specialized in public corruption and white-collar crime. For 3 years, my family had made me feel small, irrelevant, like my choices didn't matter. They'd dismissed my career, my values, my dedication to justice, as the foolish idealism of someone who didn't understand how the real world worked. Now they were about to learn exactly how well I understood the real world, and how effectively I could use the law to change it. The wedding invitation sat on my coffee table, gilt edges catching the lamplight. In 5 weeks, I'd walk into that room full of Boston's corrupt elite, wearing my uniform and carrying the full authority of a district attorney's office. They thought they were investigating me. They had no idea I was about to investigate all of them. The decision to attend Victoria's wedding had been easy. The decision of how to attend, that was proving more complicated. I stood in my bedroom on a Saturday morning 3 weeks before the wedding, staring at 2 very different outfits laid out on my bed. On the left, a conservative navy dress suitable for blending into the background of a Pemberton family event. On the right, my dress blue military uniform, complete with ribbons, insignia, and the unmistakable authority that came with federal law enforcement credentials. For 3 years, I'd worn civilian clothes to family events, trying to minimize the awkwardness of my career choices. I'd downplayed my military service, deflected questions about my work, and let them treat me like their charitable project, the family member who needed patient understanding while she figured out her life. Those days were over. My phone rang, interrupting my contemplation. The caller ID showed a number I'd been expecting. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Agent Walsh, I answered, settling into the chair by my window. DA Pemberton, thank you for taking my call on a Saturday. I know you're busy. Not too busy for this conversation. What did your preliminary review turn up? 3 days ago, I'd made a decision that would have seemed impossible a month earlier. I'd reached out to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and requested an informal consultation about patterns of corruption in Boston's legal and business community. Not an official investigation, not yet, but a professional conversation between law enforcement colleagues about potential federal crimes. It's interesting, Agent Walsh said, her voice carefully neutral. The network you've identified shows several characteristics we typically associate with organized corruption. Shell companies, rotating board memberships, charitable foundations that seem more focused on social events than charitable work. And Richardson Maritime? That's where it gets really interesting. The customs violations your future cousin-in-law's company is facing? They're part of a larger pattern. We've been tracking similar reporting discrepancies across multiple shipping companies, all using the same law firm for their defense. Pemberton, Crowley and Associates. Exactly. Your uncle's firm has represented 14 companies currently under federal investigation for various white-collar crimes. Tax evasion, securities fraud, customs violations, bid rigging on government contracts. Individually, these might be coincidences. Together, they suggest something more systematic. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the same feeling I got when pieces of a complex prosecution started falling into place. What would you need to open a formal investigation? Evidence of coordination. Proof that the law firm wasn't just representing these clients, but actively facilitating their criminal activity. Or evidence of a conspiracy to influence law enforcement or judicial proceedings. I thought about the private investigators my family had hired to dig into my background. 3 separate PIs, according to Detective Santos, all looking for ammunition to use against me. All hired by Uncle Charles's firm. Agent Walsh, what would you say if I told you that my family's law firm hired multiple private investigators to conduct opposition research on a sitting district attorney? There was a pause. I'd say that sounds like potential obstruction of justice, depending on their intent and methods. And if that district attorney happened to be in a position to investigate financial crimes committed by the firm's clients, then I'd say we might have grounds for a federal investigation into conspiracy to obstruct justice. The pieces were falling into place faster than I'd expected. My family's panic about my appointment wasn't just about embarrassment or family reputation. It was about self-preservation. Agent Walsh, I have a wedding to attend in 3 weeks. A wedding where most of the key players in this network will be present, including several individuals currently under federal investigation. DA Pemberton, I hope you're not suggesting what I think you're suggesting. I'm suggesting that family weddings are excellent opportunities for law enforcement professionals to observe potential criminal associates in their natural habitat. Purely as a concerned citizen, of course. Agent Walsh was quiet for a moment. If you were to observe anything at this wedding that suggested ongoing criminal activity or coordination, that would be valuable intelligence for any future investigation. Understood. And Agent Walsh, you might want to look into the guest list. I'll email you what I have. After we hung up, I walked back to my bed and looked at the two outfits again. The choice was clear now. I picked up the navy dress and hung it back in the closet. Then I lifted my dress blues and held them up to the light, watching the brass buttons catch the morning's sun. When I walked into Victoria's wedding, I wouldn't be skulking in the background in civilian clothes, hoping not to be noticed. I'd be announcing exactly who I was and what I represented. Let them try to ignore a federal prosecutor in full military dress uniform. Let them try to dismiss someone with the authority to destroy their carefully constructed world of legal corruption. My doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw Detective Santos holding 2 coffee cups and what looked like a manila folder. I brought caffeine and information, she said when I opened the door. You're going to need both. We sat at my kitchen table as she opened the folder. Remember those PIs your family hired? I did some more digging. It gets worse. She spread out several photos across the table. This is Thomas Chen, one of the investigators. Former Boston PD, now working for Crimson City Investigations. He's been asking questions about you at your old haunts in Virginia, the courthouse, your apartment building, local bars. I studied the photos. Chen looked like what Hollywood would cast as a generic private investigator. Middle-aged, unremarkable, the kind of person who could blend into a crowd. What kind of questions? The kind that suggest they're not just looking for professional misconduct, they're looking for personal vulnerabilities, financial problems, relationship issues, drinking habits, mental health concerns, anything they could use to undermine your credibility. She pulled out another set of photos. This is Rebecca Morrison, also hired by your family's firm. She's been talking to people from your Harvard days, your military training, even your high school. She's trying to build a psychological profile. Looking for what? Character weaknesses, past mistakes, anything that might suggest you're unstable, unreliable, or corrupt. Riley, they're not just trying to protect themselves from potential prosecution. They're building a case to destroy you if necessary. The third set of photos showed a man I didn't recognize. Older, expensive suit. The kind of polished appearance that screamed wealth and influence. Who's this? That's where it gets really interesting. His name is Vincent Carbone. He's not a PI. He's a, quote, reputation management specialist who works exclusively for high-net-worth individuals and corporations facing legal challenges. Maria leaned forward, her expression grim. Riley, this guy's specialty is destroying prosecutors who get too close to his clients. He's been linked to 3 cases in the past 5 years, where prosecutors suddenly found themselves facing ethics investigations, sexual harassment allegations, or mysterious financial irregularities that destroyed their careers. I felt cold. And my family hired him. Your uncle's firm hired him, paid his retainer 2 days after your DA appointment was announced. That's not coincidence, Riley. That's warfare. I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the street below. A month ago, I'd thought my biggest challenge would be facing family disappointment and condescension at Victoria's wedding. Now I was looking at a coordinated campaign to destroy my career and possibly my life. Maria, what would you do if you were in my position? Honestly, I'd be terrified. But I'd also be pissed off. And if I were you, with your resources and your position, I'd make damn sure they regretted starting this fight. I turned back to her. What do you mean? Riley, you're not just any prosecutor they can intimidate or discredit. You're a federal law enforcement officer with access to databases and investigative resources they can't imagine. You're a Harvard-trained lawyer who knows exactly how to build criminal cases. And most importantly, you're not corrupt, which means they can't find any real dirt on you. She gathered the photos back into the folder. They're fighting with traditional weapons, money, influence, character assassination. But you have something they don't have. What's that? The law. The real law, not the kind of legal maneuvering your uncle's firm specializes in. Criminal law. Federal jurisdiction. The kind of power that can't be bought or influenced. After Maria left, I sat in my apartment thinking about her words. For 3 years, my family had made me feel powerless. The disappointing relative whose choices didn't matter, whose career was a joke, whose values were naive. But they were wrong. I wasn't powerless. I was the most dangerous person they'd ever encountered, and they'd been too arrogant to realize it until it was too late. I opened my laptop and began making a list, not just of my family's potential crimes, but of the resources I had to investigate them. Federal databases I could access, law enforcement contacts across multiple jurisdictions, investigative techniques I'd learned in military intelligence training. Uncle Charles thought he was sophisticated because he could help wealthy clients hide money in offshore accounts and navigate regulatory loopholes. But he'd never faced a prosecutor who understood both military intelligence gathering and federal criminal procedure. James Richardson thought his family's shipping company could continue violating federal customs laws because they had expensive lawyers and political connections. But he'd never been investigated by someone with access to international law enforcement databases and maritime crime task forces. Victoria thought she could protect her new husband's criminal enterprise because she worked at a prestigious law firm and moved in the right social circles. But she'd never encountered a prosecutor who didn't care about social circles and couldn't be intimidated by wealth or influence. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. This is bigger than you know. A friend." I stared at the message, wondering who could have gotten my personal number and what they meant by bigger than you know. Before I could decide whether to respond, another message appeared. "Coffee shop on King Street, 7 p.m. tonight. Come alone. I have information about your family you need to hear." Every instinct I'd developed in military intelligence training told me this was dangerous. Anonymous contacts, mysterious meetings, vague promises of information. These were classic signs of either a trap or someone trying to manipulate me. But my prosecutor's instincts were equally strong. If someone had information about my family's criminal activities, I needed to hear it, especially if it was information that could help build a federal case. I looked at the clock. 4 p.m. 3 hours to decide whether to meet this mysterious contact, and 3 hours to prepare for whatever they might tell me. I made my decision and reached for my phone. First, I called Agent Walsh. "Agent Walsh, I've received contact from someone claiming to have information about my family. They want to meet tonight." "DA Pemberton, I strongly advise against meeting with unknown contacts, especially given the current circumstances. I understand the risks, but if this person has evidence of federal crimes, we need that information. If you're determined to do this, you need backup, and you need to record the conversation." "Agreed. Can you arrange surveillance?" "I can have agents in the area. But Riley, be careful. If your family is as desperate as they seem, they might be setting you up." My second call was to Detective Santos. "Maria, I need a favor. I'm meeting with an unknown contact tonight who claims to have information about my family. I need someone watching my back." "Riley, that sounds like a terrible idea." "Probably, but it's also the only lead I have to whatever my family is really involved in. Will you help me?" There was a pause. "Text me the details. I'll be there." My third call was to Colonel Martinez. "Colonel, I need to inform you that I may be walking into a situation tonight that could compromise my military position. If something happens to me, I want you to know that I've been investigating potential federal crimes involving my family." "Captain Pemberton, what the hell are you talking about?" I explained the situation, from the private investigators to the FBI consultation to the mysterious contact. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Riley, you're either the bravest officer I've ever served with or the most reckless. Possibly both. Colonel, if my family is involved in organized corruption and they're trying to destroy me to protect themselves, then I have a duty to investigate, both as a prosecutor and as a military officer. I understand your position, but I want you to remember something. You're not expendable. Whatever crimes your family may have committed, they're not worth your life." "I'll be careful, Colonel." "See that you are. And Riley? If you need extraction, if this goes bad, you call me immediately. Understood?" "Understood." At 6:30 p.m., I dressed carefully for my meeting with the mysterious contact. Dark jeans, black jacket, comfortable shoes in case I needed to move quickly. I clipped a small recording device to my bra and made sure my phone was fully charged and set to automatically upload recordings to a secure cloud account. I also did something that would have seemed impossible a month ago. I strapped on a concealed carry holster and checked my service weapon. 3 weeks of investigating my family had taught me that wealthy, desperate people were capable of anything. The coffee shop on King Street was a small, independently owned place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. The kind of place where people minded their own business and conversations could be held without attracting attention. I arrived at 6:55 p.m. and ordered a coffee, choosing a table near the back with a clear view of both the front door and the rear exit. Detective Santos would be watching from across the street, and FBI agents would be positioned within a 2-block radius. At exactly 7 p.m., a woman walked through the front door and looked around the coffee shop. She was about 40, well-dressed but not ostentatiously so, with the kind of carefully maintained appearance that suggested money without advertising it. She made eye contact with me and walked to my table. "Riley Pemberton?" I nodded. "You're the one who texted me?" "My name is Patricia Blackwood. I used to work for your uncle's law firm." She sat down across from me, her hands shaking slightly as she placed them on the table. "I need to tell you things about your family that you're not going to want to hear." "I'm listening." "First, you need to understand that what you think you know about Pemberton, Crowley and Associates is just the surface. Your uncle's firm isn't just representing criminals. They're facilitating criminal enterprises, money laundering, tax evasion, bribery, fraud. They've been running a criminal conspiracy for over a decade." I kept my expression neutral, though my heart was racing. "What's your evidence?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. Financial records, client communications, meeting notes, everything I could copy before I left the firm. "Why did you leave?" "Because I found out what they were planning to do to you." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Riley, they're not just trying to discredit you. They're planning to frame you for crimes you didn't commit." The coffee shop suddenly felt very cold. "What kind of crimes?" "Financial misconduct. They're going to create evidence that you've been taking bribes, misusing DA office resources, maybe even involved in drug trafficking." Vincent Carbone specializes in this kind of character assassination. He plants evidence, creates false witnesses, builds cases that look absolutely convincing. I thought about the private investigators, the background checks, the questions about my financial situation and personal life. They hadn't been looking for existing dirt. They'd been gathering information to create fake dirt. "How do you know all this?" "Because I was Charles Pemberton's assistant for 8 years. I saw everything, heard everything, typed every document. And 3 weeks ago, I was in a meeting where they discussed neutralizing the Riley problem before she could become a threat to client interests." Patricia leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Riley, they have a file on you that's 3 inches thick. Financial records, personal habits, relationship history, psychological profiles. They know things about you that even you probably don't remember." "Like what?" "Like the fact that you took out a personal loan 2 years ago to help pay for your mother's medical bills when she had that cancer scare. The loan that you paid back ahead of schedule from your military salary." I remembered that loan. My mother had needed experimental treatment that wasn't covered by insurance, and I'd quietly borrowed the money rather than let her worry about finances while fighting cancer. I'd never told anyone in the family that I'd paid for her treatment. How could they possibly know about that? "Because they've been monitoring your financial records for years, Riley. Every bank account, every credit card, every transaction. They've been building a profile on you since you graduated from Harvard, just in case you ever became a problem." The magnitude of the violation hit me like a physical blow. My own family had been illegally surveilling me for years, treating me like a potential threat rather than a relative. "There's more," Patricia continued. "They have surveillance photos of you from the past month, meeting with FBI agents, talking to Detective Santos, researching their clients. They know you're building a case against them. Then why are you warning me?" "Because I have a daughter your age, and if someone was planning to destroy her life to protect a bunch of rich criminals, I'd want someone to warn her." Patricia's voice cracked slightly. And because I'm tired of being part of a system that destroys good people to protect bad ones. She slid the flash drive across the table. Everything you need is on there. Financial records proving the money laundering, client communications showing the conspiracy, meeting notes detailing their plans to frame you. I pocketed the flash drive, my mind racing through the implications. Patricia, if you're right about all this, then you're in danger too. If they find out you warned me. I know, that's why I'm leaving town tonight. I have a sister in Seattle, and I'll be staying with her until this is over. Quote, before you go, I need to ask you something. The wedding invitation I received, is that part of their plan? Patricia's expression grew even more grim. Riley, that wedding isn't a family celebration. It's a trap. They want you there so they can publicly humiliate you, discredit you in front of all their powerful friends and associates. Vincent Carbone has something planned for that wedding that's going to destroy your reputation permanently. What kind of something? I don't know the details, but I heard Charles tell Vincent that by the end of Victoria's wedding, the Riley problem will be solved permanently, and she'll never be able to practice law again. I felt a chill run down my spine. They're going to try to arrest me at the wedding? I think it's worse than that. I think they're going to create a situation where you look guilty of something serious enough to end your career and possibly send you to prison. Patricia stood up, glancing nervously around the coffee shop. Riley, I know this is your family, and I know how hard this must be to hear, but these people are dangerous. They've destroyed careers before, ruined lives, sent innocent people to prison to protect their criminal enterprise. Why haven't they been caught before now? Because they're smart, they're connected, and they've never faced a prosecutor who couldn't be bought, intimidated, or destroyed. She looked me directly in the eyes. Until now. As Patricia headed for the door, she turned back one more time. Riley, whatever you decide to do with that information, be very careful. Your family has already decided you're their enemy. Now you have to decide what you're going to do about it. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop staring at the flash drive in my hand. Such a small thing to contain evidence of a decade-long criminal conspiracy. Such a small thing to hold the power to destroy my entire family. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Santos. All clear, you okay? I typed back, meeting's over. I'm fine, but we need to talk. Another text, this one from Agent Walsh. Debrief tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. at the Federal Building. I finished my coffee and walked out into the cool evening air, my mind reeling from everything Patricia had told me. 3 weeks ago, I'd thought my biggest problem was facing family condescension at a wedding. Now I knew I was walking into a trap designed to destroy my life and career. But I also knew something my family didn't know yet. I had evidence of their crimes, federal law enforcement backing, and the legal authority to bring down their entire criminal enterprise. The question was whether I could do it before they destroyed me first. As I walked to my car, I made a decision that surprised even me. I wasn't going to skip Victoria's wedding. I wasn't going to hide or run or try to avoid the confrontation they were planning. I was going to attend that wedding in my full-dress military uniform, with my district attorney credentials, and with enough evidence to arrest half the guest list. If they wanted to make Victoria's wedding the final battleground in this war between my integrity and their corruption, then that's exactly what it would be. But they were about to learn that they'd chosen the wrong prosecutor to frame, and the wrong district attorney to destroy. The wedding was in 2.5 weeks. I had that long to build an airtight federal case against my own family. Time to get to work. The morning of Victoria's wedding dawned gray and humid, typical Boston weather that matched my mood perfectly. I stood in my hotel room at the Four Seasons, looking out at the harbor while adjusting my dress blue uniform for the final time. Every ribbon was perfectly aligned, every brass button polished to a mirror shine. The district attorney badge clipped to my chest caught the light like a warning. 2.5 weeks of investigation had transformed me from a family disappointment into a federal prosecutor with enough evidence to destroy the Pemberton criminal empire. The flash drive Patricia Blackwood had given me contained financial records proving money laundering operations totaling over $50 million. Agent Walsh and her team had built conspiracy cases based on my intelligence. And most importantly, we had uncovered Vincent Carbone's plan to frame me at today's wedding. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Walsh. All teams in position. Remember, we need them to make the first move before we can act. Stay calm, stay professional, and let them incriminate themselves. Another message from Detective Santos. Backup units ready. You look like a badass in that uniform. Go show them what a real prosecutor looks like. I smiled grimly at my reflection. Today would end one of two ways. Either the Pemberton family would successfully destroy my career and potentially send me to prison on fabricated charges, or I would use the full power of federal law enforcement to bring down a criminal conspiracy that had operated with impunity for over a decade. The Cathedral of the Holy Cross was exactly what I'd expected. Old Boston grandeur designed to impress and intimidate. Limestone columns, stained glass windows. The kind of architecture that whispered about power and tradition. The perfect venue for Victoria to marry into another corrupt fortune, while their criminal associates watched and applauded. I arrived precisely 15 minutes before the ceremony began, timing calculated to make an entrance without appearing dramatically late. As I walked up the cathedral steps in full military dress uniform, conversations stopped, heads turned. The whispers started immediately. Is that Riley Pemberton? I thought she was just a paralegal or something. District attorney? She's barely out of college. What's she doing wearing that military costume to a wedding? I kept my expression neutral and my posture military straight as I entered the cathedral. The guest list read like a rogues gallery of New England corruption. Federal judges whose sentencing patterns suggested compromise. State politicians whose voting records aligned suspiciously with their campaign contributions. Business leaders whose companies consistently avoided consequences for environmental and financial violations. Uncle Charles stood near the altar in his role as father of the bride, his face cycling through several emotions as he spotted me. Surprise, anger, calculation, and finally something that looked almost like fear. He'd been expecting me to attend in civilian clothes, to try to blend in and avoid attention. The military uniform changed everything. It announced exactly who I was and what I represented. It made ignoring me impossible. Aunt Margaret rushed over, her society's smile strained to the breaking point. Riley, how unexpected to see you in uniform. I thought this was a family celebration, not a military event. Every day is a military event when you're serving your country, Aunt Margaret. You look lovely, by the way. That necklace is stunning. It must have cost a fortune. Her hand moved instinctively to the diamond choker around her neck. A choker that, according to my investigation, had been purchased with money laundered through one of Uncle Charles's shell companies. Well, yes, it was a gift from Charles for our anniversary. He's always been so generous. I'm sure he has been, generous with other people's money anyway. Her smile faltered. I'm sorry? Nothing, Aunt Margaret, just thinking about the interesting financial arrangements some families make. Before she could respond, the wedding march began, and we all turned toward the back of the cathedral. Victoria appeared in the doorway, wearing what looked like a $10,000 dress that probably represented more money than most families spent on their entire wedding. As she walked down the aisle on Uncle Charles's arm, I made eye contact with James Richardson III, the groom. He looked pale and nervous, which was understandable given that his company was currently under federal investigation for customs violations. What he didn't know yet was that Agent Walsh's team had expanded their investigation to include tax evasion and securities fraud based on evidence I'd provided. The ceremony proceeded with typical high society pageantry. Readings from biblical passages about love and commitment. Ironic, considering that most of the people in attendance had made their fortunes by betraying various commitments to law, ethics, and honest business practices. I spent the ceremony observing the guests, mentally cataloging faces I recognized from my investigation. State Senator Michael Thornton, whose campaign finances we'd been tracking. Judge Patricia Weatherby, whose sentencing patterns in white-collar cases had attracted federal attention. Police Chief Robert Manning, who'd recently announced his early retirement after questions arose about evidence handling in several high-profile cases. All here to celebrate Victoria's marriage to a man whose family business was about to be indicted for federal crimes. The reception at the Four Seasons Hotel was everything I'd expected from a Pemberton family event, excessive, ostentatious, and designed to demonstrate wealth and influence. Ice sculptures, imported flowers, a string quartet playing classical music while guests drank champagne that probably cost more per bottle than most people made in a week. I moved through the crowd like a shark among minnows, my uniform drawing stares and whispered conversations. Every ribbon on my chest told a story of service and dedication that stood in stark contrast to the corruption surrounding me. "Riley!" Victoria appeared at my elbow, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a silk train. "I'm so glad you came, and in uniform. How patriotic of you." "Congratulations, Victoria. You look beautiful. Marriage suits you, though I hope this one lasts longer than the first." Her smile tightened. "Well, James is nothing like Marcus. He's much more stable, more committed to our shared values." Shared values. I imagine those include creative approaches to tax liability and federal regulations. "I'm sorry?" "Nothing. Just thinking about how some couples find common ground in their business philosophies." Before Victoria could respond, Uncle Charles materialized beside us. "Riley, what a surprise to see you here in full military regalia. I hope you're not planning to make this into some kind of political statement." "Not political, Uncle Charles. Professional. This uniform represents my commitment to upholding federal law and protecting American citizens from those who would exploit them." His face reddened slightly. "I think you might be taking your new position a bit too seriously. You're among family here, not criminals. Are those categories mutually exclusive?" The tension in our small circle ratcheted up several notches. Victoria's smile became completely artificial. Uncle Charles's jaw clenched visibly, and I felt the satisfaction of landing a direct hit. "Riley," Uncle Charles said, his voice carefully controlled, "I think we need to have a private conversation." "I think we do too, but not here and not now. This is Victoria's day, after all." "Actually," a new voice interrupted, "I think now would be perfect." We all turned to see Vincent Carboni approaching, the reputation management specialist Patricia Blackwood had warned me about. He was exactly as she'd described. Expensive suit, polished appearance, the kind of predatory confidence that came from years of destroying people's lives for money. "I don't believe we've been introduced," I said, though I knew exactly who he was. "Vincent Carbone. I represent various interests that might be affected by your zealous approach to law enforcement." "Ah, the character assassination specialist. I've heard about your work. 3 prosecutors destroyed in 5 years. That's quite a track record." His smile was cold and calculating. "I prefer to think of it as protecting legitimate business interests from overzealous government interference. And I prefer to think of it as obstruction of justice, conspiracy to interfere with federal investigations, and conspiracy to commit fraud. But I suppose we'll let the courts decide which interpretation is correct." Uncle Charles stepped forward, clearly agitated. "Riley, I think you're misunderstanding the situation here. Mr. Carbone is simply a consultant who helps businesses navigate complex regulatory environments." "Is that what we're calling it? Because the evidence I've seen suggests he specializes in framing prosecutors who get too close to his clients' criminal activities." The color drained from Uncle Charles's face. "Evidence? What evidence?" I smiled, the same cold expression I used in court when a defense attorney walked into a trap. "The kind of evidence that tends to surface when federal investigators start looking into organized criminal conspiracies. The kind that shows patterns of coordination between supposedly independent entities." Vincent Carbone's expression shifted from confident to calculating. "Miss Pemberton, I think you might be operating under some misconceptions about the nature of legitimate business consulting." Quote, "Really? Then perhaps you can explain why you were paid a $200,000 retainer by Pemberton, Crowley and Associates 2 days after my DA appointment was announced, or why you've been coordinating with private investigators to build a fabricated case against a sitting district attorney." The silence around our group became deafening. Other guests had begun to notice the tension and were gravitating toward our conversation, sensing drama. "I think," Uncle Charles said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury, "that you're allowing your new position to go to your head. You're making accusations that could be considered slanderous." "Actually, Uncle Charles, I'm not making accusations. I'm presenting evidence of federal crimes to individuals who are about to be arrested for those crimes." "Arrested?" Victoria's voice was high and strained. Riley, what are you talking about? I looked around at the growing crowd of guests, recognizing faces from my investigation. State senators, federal judges, business leaders, all of them connected to the criminal network my family had been operating for years. I'm talking about a decade-long criminal conspiracy involving money laundering, tax evasion, bribery, customs violations, and conspiracy to obstruct federal investigations. I'm talking about a network of corruption that reaches from Boston's financial district to the federal courthouse. You're insane, Uncle Charles snarled. You're a delusional child who thinks her little law enforcement costume gives her the right to attack her own family with wild conspiracy theories. Am I? Vincent, would you like to tell everyone about your plan to plant evidence in my hotel room tonight? The evidence that was supposed to frame me for taking bribes from drug dealers? Vincent Carbone had gone completely still, his eyes locked on mine with the intensity of a predator recognizing another predator. Or perhaps, I continued, Uncle Charles would like to explain the $50 million in laundered money that's been flowing through his firm's trust accounts over the past 3 years. That's enough, Uncle Charles roared. You're obviously having some kind of breakdown. Security! But before hotel security could respond, the main entrance to the reception hall opened, and Agent Walsh walked in, followed by 6 FBI agents in full tactical gear. Ladies and gentlemen, Agent Walsh announced, her voice carrying clearly across the reception hall. I'm Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have federal warrants for the arrest of several individuals present at this gathering. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Guests began talking loudly, some heading for exits, others pulling out phones to call lawyers. Uncle Charles looked like he might have a heart attack. Victoria was staring at me with an expression of pure hatred, and Vincent Carbone was already calculating his exit strategy. Charles Pemberton, Agent Walsh continued, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering, tax evasion, and obstruction of justice. 2 agents moved toward Uncle Charles, who had gone completely pale. This is outrageous. I demand to speak to my lawyer. You'll have that opportunity, Mr. Pemberton. Vincent Carbone, you're under arrest for conspiracy to obstruct justice, conspiracy to commit fraud, and conspiracy to interfere with federal investigations. As the agents moved through the crowd making arrests, I found myself face to face with Victoria, whose wedding day had just become a federal crime scene. How could you do this? She whispered, tears streaming down her face. How could you destroy our family? I didn't destroy our family, Victoria. I exposed the criminal conspiracy that was hiding behind our family name. There's a difference. They raised you, they paid for your education, they gave you everything. They gave me a name that was built on corruption and crime. They tried to keep me small and irrelevant so I couldn't threaten their criminal enterprise. And when that failed, they tried to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. James Richardson III was being led away in handcuffs, his shipping company's customs violations having expanded into a much larger federal case. Victoria watched her new husband disappear through the door, her life as she'd known it ending before the reception dinner had even been served. The evidence against your husband's company is overwhelming, I told her gently. Customs violations, tax evasion, environmental crimes. He'll probably spend the next 10 to 15 years in federal prison. And Uncle Charles? Money laundering carries a 20-year sentence. Conspiracy to obstruct justice adds another 10. At his age, he'll die in prison. Victoria sank into a nearby chair, her expensive wedding dress pooling around her like spilled cream. What happens to the rest of us? Quote, that depends on how much you knew and how much you participated. The firm's associates, who were just doing legal work, without knowing about the criminal conspiracy, might face ethics violations, but probably not criminal charges. The ones who actively participated, I shrugged, they'll face federal prosecution. What about the family money, the estate, the foundation? All frozen pending investigation. The government tends to seize assets that were acquired through criminal activity. As I watched my cousin absorb the reality of her new situation, widowed within hours of marriage, her family fortune gone, her father headed to federal prison, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction at seeing justice served, sadness for the family relationships that were ending, and relief that the weight of their corruption was no longer my burden to carry. Detective Santos appeared at my elbow. Well, that was quite a wedding reception. I don't think Emily Post covers what to do when the FBI arrests half the guest list. At least the catering was good before the arrests started. Riley, you realize you just brought down one of the most powerful criminal networks in New England, right? This is going to make national news. I looked around the reception hall, now swarming with FBI agents, federal prosecutors, and very nervous wedding guests. My family's carefully constructed world of wealth and influence was crumbling in real time, replaced by federal indictments and criminal prosecutions. Good. Maybe it will send a message that being wealthy and connected doesn't make you immune to federal law. Agent Walsh approached with a tablet in her hands. DA Pemberton, we need your statement for the record. And I wanted to let you know that based on the evidence you provided, we're opening investigations into 14 additional individuals and 7 companies. Will you need me to testify? Probably in several cases. But Riley? She smiled. This is going to be the kind of career-defining prosecution that makes legends. You just brought down a criminal conspiracy that had been operating with impunity for over a decade. As the reception hall gradually emptied of guests and filled with law enforcement personnel, I found myself standing alone near the windows overlooking Boston Harbor, the city where my family had built their criminal empire, where they'd used wealth and influence to corrupt judges, politicians, and business leaders. My phone buzzed with a call from Colonel Martinez. Captain Pemberton, I'm watching the news. Are you all right? I'm fine, Colonel. Better than fine, actually. Riley, what you did today, exposing corruption at this level, bringing down a criminal network that included your own family, that takes courage that most people can't imagine. It also felt like the right thing to do, the only thing to do. The Pentagon is proud of you, the JAG Corps is proud of you, your country is proud of you. After we hung up, I walked to the hotel lobby and sat in a quiet corner, finally allowing myself to process everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, I'd been the family disappointment, the cousin who'd wasted her Harvard education on idealistic nonsense. Today, I'd used that education and my position as district attorney to expose a criminal conspiracy that had stolen millions of dollars, corrupted government officials, and perverted the justice system for over a decade. My phone rang again. This time it was my mother. Riley? Her voice was shaking. I just saw the news. Charles has been arrested? Victoria's husband? I don't understand what's happening. Mom, Uncle Charles has been running a criminal conspiracy for years. Money laundering, tax evasion, bribery. The family fortune was built on crime. That's impossible. Charles is a respected lawyer. The family has always been honorable. No, Mom. The family has always been good at hiding dishonorable activity behind respectability. There's a difference. There was a long pause. Riley, what's going to happen to us? To the family? The criminal members of the family are going to prison. The assets acquired through criminal activity will be seized by the government, and the rest of us will have to figure out how to live with integrity instead of corruption. But the estate, the foundation, your inheritance. Mom, I don't want an inheritance that was paid for with stolen money. I'd rather earn my own living honestly than live off the proceeds of crime. I don't know how to process this. This morning I had a family, and tonight you have a daughter who's a federal prosecutor dedicated to upholding the law. That should be enough. 6 months later, the Richmond County District Attorney's Office buzzed with activity as I reviewed case files for the upcoming prosecutions. The Pemberton conspiracy case had become a federal sensation, leading to investigations in 12 states and resulting in 43 indictments so far. Uncle Charles had pled guilty to money laundering and conspiracy charges in exchange for a 15-year sentence. Vincent Carbone was facing trial on multiple felony charges, his reputation management business having been exposed as a sophisticated obstruction of justice operation. James Richardson III had been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, his shipping company permanently shut down. Victoria had avoided criminal charges by cooperating with federal investigators, providing detailed information about the financial arrangements she'd witnessed during her time at the family firm. She was working as a paralegal at a small practice in Vermont. Her days of high society privilege permanently ended. My phone rang, interrupting my review of a new case involving municipal corruption in Norfolk. Riley, it's Patricia Blackwood. The woman who'd warned me about my family's plan to frame me had become something of a friend over the past 6 months, her courage in coming forward having saved my career and possibly my life. Patricia, how are you settling in Seattle? Much better than I expected. I wanted to call because I just saw the news about the latest indictments. 43 people? That's incredible. And we're not done yet. The investigation keeps expanding as we follow the money trails and uncover new connections. Riley, I need to ask you something. Do you ever regret it, destroying your own family to uphold the law? I looked out my office window at the American flag flying over the courthouse, thinking about her question, did I regret it? Patricia, I didn't destroy my family. I exposed the criminal conspiracy that was hiding behind my family name. The people who went to prison made their own choices when they decided to build their wealth through crime. But it must have been hard. They were your relatives. Being related to someone doesn't give them the right to commit crimes without consequences. If anything, it makes their crimes worse because they had every advantage and chose corruption anyway. Any word from your mother? She calls occasionally. She's had to sell the Beacon Hill house to pay legal fees, and she's living in a small apartment in Cambridge. She's angry with me, but she's also starting to understand that the family she thought she knew never really existed. Quote, what about Victoria? She sent me a card on my birthday, no message, just her signature. I think she's trying to rebuild her life, which is more than some of her friends managed. After we hung up, I returned to my case files, but my mind wandered to the wedding reception 6 months ago. The moment when Agent Walsh had walked through those doors and ended the Pemberton criminal empire forever. I'd thought that would be the end of the story. The moment when justice was served and the corrupt were brought to account. But it had really been the beginning of a new chapter in my life. The media attention had been intense for several weeks. Profile pieces in legal journals, interviews with news networks, speaking invitations from law schools across the country. The story of the young district attorney, who'd brought down her own family's criminal conspiracy, had captured public imagination in a way that surprised everyone. But more importantly, it had sent a message throughout the legal and business communities. Wealth and connections couldn't protect you from a prosecutor who couldn't be bought, intimidated, or compromised. My appointment book for the next 6 months was filled with requests from other jurisdictions asking for assistance with corruption investigations. Federal prosecutors wanted to consult on organized crime cases. State attorneys general were seeking advice on white-collar prosecutions. I'd become something I never expected. A symbol of integrity in a profession often criticized for political compromise and ethical flexibility. My assistant knocked on my door. D.A. Pemberton, there's someone here to see you. Says it's personal. I looked up to see a young woman in her mid-20s, standing in my doorway. She was well-dressed but nervous, with the kind of expensive education polish that I recognized from my own background. Can I help you? My name is Sarah Morrison. My father is Richard Morrison, CEO of Morrison Financial Group. I knew the name. Morrison Financial was currently under investigation by the SEC for securities violations, and I'd been consulting with federal prosecutors about potential criminal charges. What can I do for you, Ms. Morrison? I need to tell you about my father's business practices, about the things I've seen working at his company, about the crimes I've been asked to help cover up. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Please, sit down and start from the beginning. Quote, as Sarah Morrison began telling me about another criminal conspiracy hiding behind a respectable business facade, I felt the familiar tightness in my chest that came with a new case beginning to take shape. Some people might have been discouraged by the endless nature of corruption, the way exposing one criminal network seemed to reveal 3 others, but I found it energizing. Every corrupt business leader, every compromised politician, every criminal conspiracy that thought wealth and influence made them untouchable, they all had one thing in common. They'd never faced a prosecutor who'd been willing to destroy her own family to uphold the law. And now they would. I opened a new file folder and wrote Morrison Financial Investigation on the tab. Then I picked up my pen and prepared to take notes as Sarah Morrison continued her story. Outside my window, the American flag snapped in the breeze, and I smiled. Justice was a full-time job, but someone had to do it. And I'd discovered I was very, very good at it. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning. exactly 1 year after Victoria's disastrous wedding. Cream-colored paper, elegant script, the kind of formal announcement that once would have intimidated me. The Virginia State Bar Association cordially invites you to attend the annual award ceremony honoring outstanding achievements in criminal justice. I was being honored as Prosecutor of the Year for my work on the Pemberton conspiracy case and the subsequent investigations it had spawned. 43 convictions, over $200 million in recovered assets, and the dismantling of a criminal network that had operated across 12 states. My mother had called to congratulate me, her voice still strained but warmer than it had been in months. "I'm proud of you, Riley. I don't understand everything you did, but I'm proud of you." Victoria had sent a brief note. "Congratulations. You chose justice over family, and I'm beginning to understand that was the right choice." But the message that meant the most had come from Colonel Martinez. "Captain Pemberton, you've brought honor to the uniform and pride to the JAG Corps. The country is safer because of your courage." As I dressed for the award ceremony in my dress blue uniform, I thought about the choice I'd made a year ago. The choice to attend Victoria's wedding in uniform rather than civilian clothes. The choice to represent law and order rather than family loyalty. The choice to stand for justice rather than hide from confrontation. It had cost me a family, but it had gained me something more valuable. The knowledge that when tested, I'd chosen integrity over comfort, justice over corruption, and truth over convenience. The young woman who'd once felt like the family disappointment had become a federal prosecutor with the power to hold the powerful accountable for their crimes. And I was just getting started. The phone rang as I finished adjusting my uniform. Agent Walsh's name appeared on the caller ID. "Riley, we just received a tip about a possible corruption ring involving 3 state senators and a federal judge. Are you interested in another family-destroying investigation?" I smiled, checking my appearance one final time in the mirror. The district attorney badge gleamed on my chest, and the ribbons told the story of service, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to justice. "Agent Walsh, when do we start? Because some fights are worth having, even when they cost you everything. Especially when they cost you everything." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.